Paul says that more than 500 people at once saw the risen Jesus. This wasn't 500 people at various times and places, but 500 people at once. That sounds like a stunning event. What did they see? What happened? Did they write about it? Can we witness it through their records? What was this moment? First, let's see what we can glean from Paul's words directly. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. 1 Corinthians 15:3 and 6. A few details are immediately clear. Paul received this tradition, meaning he was not there personally. He was told the story, presumably by those who were there. We know this because this was not a random bit of information, but rather Paul considered it of primary importance. This wasn't a random factoid that could be believed or not. It was of first importance, meaning that nothing was more important than this. It must be passed on well. Paul knew who the 500 were, at least to the extent that he could identify most as still being alive. This provides a solid starting ground. But it still doesn't tell us what happened. Do we have personal accounts of this appearance? Did any of the 500 record this event? It seems so. And Jesus led them out as far as Bethany, and lifting up his hands, he blessed them. While he blessed them, he parted from them and was carried up into heaven. And they worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple, blessing God. Luke 24. 50-53. This ascension was witnessed by a large group of followers, comprising most of the believers in Jerusalem at the time, perhaps as many as 500. If there is any moment of Jesus' post-resurrection appearances that 500 people could witness at once, it was the Ascension. The moment Jesus returned to heaven. It took place outdoors, on a hillside, providing abundant space. Jesus and the disciples who witnessed this moment came from Jerusalem, currently the focal point of the young Christian movement. If any city held 500 believers at this moment, it was Jerusalem. Simple put, the Ascension meets all the criteria for being the moment 500 disciples witnessed at once. Luke's second volume, Acts, adds in details he didn't have space to record in the first, including specific identities of many of these witnesses. And when Jesus had said these things, as they were looking on, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while they were gazing into heaven as he went, behold, 2 men stood by them in white robes and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, a Sabbath day's journey away. And when they had entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying, Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James. All these, with one accord, were devoting themselves to prayer, together with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. Acts 1:9-14. Before we finish this answer, we have to ask, is Luke quoting eyewitnesses? Are these accounts from those who were present? Luke records the names of many, Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James, along with Mary the mother of Jesus, Jesus' brothers, including James, and the other notable women who followed Jesus. If the Ascension is indeed the event of the 500, we now have many of them identified by name. To wrap this up then, we have only to ask, did these named people tell Luke of the event personally, delivering direct eyewitness testimony? Luke tells us that yes, indeed they did. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. Luke 1:1 1:4. Luke states that those who were eyewitnesses delivered their accounts to us, to Luke, and those in association with him. Luke emphasizes the directness of the testimony he received for one reason: to provide Theophilus certainty concerning what he has been taught. These are not old traditions passed down through generations before being recorded. This is not a story that grew over time as each recipient embellished it and passed it on. This is a story told directly to the historian, Luke, from the mouths of the eyewitnesses themselves. It seems, therefore, that we do have accounts from these 500 witnesses. Luke provides eyewitness testimony directly, while Paul passes on the tradition. In this statement, the speaker is likely referring to the claim that Jesus' resurrection was witnessed by 500 people, an event mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15:6. The Apostle Paul wrote this letter to the Corinthians, stating that after Jesus was raised from the dead, he appeared to more than 500 believers at one time. The argument here suggests that the accounts of these witnesses form a historical tradition passed down through the New Testament writings. Luke's account. The reference to Luke providing eyewitness testimony refers to his role in documenting the life of Jesus in the early Christian movement in the Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles. Although Luke was not an eyewitness to all the events he describes, he states that he carefully investigated everything, Luke 1:1-4, relying on first-hand witnesses and oral traditions. His work is seen as a written account based on eyewitness testimony. Paul's tradition. The reference to Paul passing on the tradition suggests that Paul, although not an eyewitness to the resurrection itself, inherited and transmitted the teachings and beliefs of early Christians. In 1 Corinthians 15:3-8, Paul emphasizes that he received these traditions and passed them on to the Corinthian church, including the appearances of the resurrected Jesus to Peter, the apostles, and the group of 500 witnesses. Paul is regarded as a key figure in early Christian theology, and his letters are central to spreading the message of Christianity. In summary, while Luke claims to base his writings on eyewitness accounts, Paul transmits the tradition of Jesus' resurrection, including the claim that 500 people witnessed it. The combination of these two approaches helps form a basis for early Christian testimony about the resurrection event.